Hello and welcome to the Walk-Off, everybody. I'm Scott Belford. We have a very special Friday show for you as we are joined by our special guest for today, the host of the JD Bunkis podcast, JD Bunkis himself. Welcome to the
Yeah.
Walk-Off, man. Thanks for
Yeah,
making time.
it would be weird if the host had a different name.
It would be weird.
I don't think anybody's done that move yet where they just like call it. I should have called it something way more famous. I should have done that. Been like,
The
this
Bob
is
McCowan podcast
yeah, exactly. And then it's just the Bob McCown podcast with JD Bunkus.
with your
Whatever.
host, JD Bunkis.
Oh
Yeah.
my God. If the boomers couldn't hate me enough, they would have hated me then.
Yeah, that's a funny comment because I get that a lot too. Just 70-year-old guys who are like, "You'll never be as good as Bobcat," and it's like,
I know.
yeah,
Like, I know.
I
I never
know.
said I would be. I never once started a show saying I'll be as good as the guy that basically invented the medium here
Yeah,
at Sportsnet.
exactly,
Yeah. No,
exactly.
trust me, it's fine.
Honestly, though, JD, big fan of your pod, man. I really
Thanks,
am.
dude.
I really liked your episode where you broke down the Mark Shapiro presser.
Thanks, man.
For a few reasons. Number one, you were rational and you gave him props where props were needed, but also you didn't sit around going, "You're right. Contextually, stability and continuity is a competitive advantage." So well done on that, man.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I think like most Blue Jays fans, you feel frustrated most at times with the front office. And I don't think this is just like exclusive to them. I think that this is probably a lot of just industries where you get bosses that want to make things seem more complicated than they are.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not to say like you could do it, right? Like, I don't think I could do Mark Shapiro's job. It's incredibly difficult. I don't think I could do Ross Atkins's job. I think that there are nuances to those positions that would honestly break some of our brains, but we're just talking about baseball. And when there's some of the stuff that gets put out there where they are trying to contextualize or go, well, actually, what you don't know, it's like, what we do know is that we pay hard earned money to go to these baseball games, that there was an expectation to win, that you guys presented that this was one of the best opportunities in all of baseball. And that when you came here, the expectation was not within 8 seasons that there wouldn't be a playoff victory after the team Alex Anthopoulos built. And so, yeah, I don't think anybody likes being talked down to. And
Mm-hmm.
unfortunately for these guys, despite, media training or years of being criticized for this, whatever, they can't help themselves. And that day, at that time, in the middle of a lost season, to be told, to be kind of like scolded,
Mm-hmm.
it was poor timing. I was like, why'd you even do this? Like, why'd you even call this media
Arrogance
conference?
arrogance seemed to be the word of the
Yeah.
presser,
Yeah.
and yeah, tough not to agree. And they set those expectations. Like, it's not like
That's it.
we just grabbed high in the sky expectations out of nowhere and then had to deal with our own over expectations. That's not how it played out. So
It isn't that supposed to be
um
sports fandom in general, though, too? It's like you're supposed to dream on a
yeah.
championship winning team. And like, yeah, stability makes sense, of course. Like, most organizations that are successful have stability, but it's also because they're successful. So you want to breed more of that. Like, I don't think that most awesome organizations, they were like, well, we kept screwing it up for a decade. But then it's like, but then,
Then we
oh, the pieces
really
started to
got it
click.
together. Yeah.
And especially like this would be one thing if it was kind of like with the Maple Leafs where Kyle Dubas was sort of learning on the job, where it was, hey, here's a guy, we're investing in him because we think that, and it turned out to be a mistake as well, but it was just like, hey, you could kind of understand. Mark Shapiro's a baseball lifer. You watch Moneyball, he's in the movie as a character, like he's been
The
around. So
antagonist, really.
yeah, kind of. Actually, Mark Shapiro's entire legacy in the movie is that Billy Bean's like go-to guy, Mark Shapiro's like, get the coffee,
Yeah. Oh,
yeah, we'll
buddy.
lose
So
him.
we were very lucky to have Mark Shapiro actually come on the
Yeah,
podcast a couple
that
years
is cool.
ago, about 18 months ago now.
Hmm.
And we asked him about Moneyball. And obviously, this is a question that he gets asked a lot because he was visibly annoyed with
Really?
being asked, because we were just like just curious, because that was most of our listener questions, was like, ask
Mm,
him what he thought about his portrayal in Moneyball, which, by the
oh,
way, hates it,
yeah,
does
of
not
course.
like his portrayal at all, obviously. Yeah.
I like to think that I'm the type of person that would see me in a movie and just go, "Wow, this is so cool that they portrayed me in a movie." But no, I'd be exactly like him,
Yeah,
where they'd
that's
be
not
like,
how it
"Who?"
went down.
Yeah, but not just that. They'd be like, "Who'd they get to play?" I'd be like, "I don't know. I figure like they should get like someone pretty cool, maybe Jeremy Renner." Then they'd be like, "No," they get some schlub nobody who's just a loudmouth idiot talk show host, being like, "The Blue Jays," and I would be furious forever too. So I get actually that's probably the most human thing I've heard about Mark
Heard about
Shapiro.
him. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. So, okay, I have a bunch of Blue Jays stuff to talk about. I
sure.
made the show notes and everything, and then literally right before you joined the Zoom, I was reading on Twitter something. So I'm going to take a hard left here,
Yeah, let's
because
do it.
as soon as I saw this, I was like, this is really interesting. So
Mhm.
this is the Bleacher Report. It is that Major League Baseball is discussing a radical 6 inning minimum for starting pitchers. And obviously, there are a lot of nuances that would need to be talked about, like pitchers coming off of injuries. What if a guy pitches 50 pitches in 1 inning and so on and so forth? But Major League Baseball really, with every rule change, seems to be just trying to undo what the Tampa Bay Rays have done to baseball over the last
Mhm.
15 years.
Mhm.
What is your initial thought, JD, on that? Because I had so many thoughts. I was just like, that's crazy, especially considering over the last 10 years, you've been reeling in the amount of innings that you're expecting of a pitcher.
Yeah. So to me, I would guess that this is a heat check. That like this is my initial reaction is Major League Baseball has been actually really successful with their new rule
Mm-hmm.
implementations. And outside of the times where I'm having like a great summer night down at the ballpark and the game goes by in like 2 hours and 12 minutes, or they go, yeah, you got to go. It's the seventh inning now. You got to go get the last beer. You're like, oh
Yeah,
God, I got to rush up here. For the most part, though, the way that baseball has been expedited has been great.
couldn't agree
Even
more.
some of the divisional changes for a league that's aspiring for more parity. There's just been a lot where pitch clock has worked out. Bases I haven't really noticed, to be honest. Like, have you? Like, do you really get the sense of the base? Anyway, it's baseball's had some good PR lately. In the world of the NBA is trying things like the midseason tournament, which
Yeah.
yeah, you go, wow, that kind of was fun for a second, but now it sucks, and that didn't really land. Where the NHL is just takes a stance of everything is totally fine, and if you think it's not, you're the
You're the
problem.
problem.
And the NFL where we like hits and their only thing is that they're like, we're gonna try to make this like inherently unsafe thing safe in a way that seems to be hurting the product. Baseball has kind of stood alone, going, we tinkered with the oldest game, the America's pastime, probably, a group of fans, an aging fan base. Like baseball's got old fans, and they tinkered with it and it's working. Even the
Mhm.
wild card stuff, like I hated when they added more and more wild card teams. I'm like, man, it used to be special to win the division and get in the playoffs and do all these things. And I don't want to see the 84 win Arizona Diamondbacks go to the postseason. But it's like, look at the standings right now. Look at the conversations. The Blue Jays fans have no idea this is happening because we're not involved. We're just
Yeah.
like, yeah, you tank. Like who cares? Vladdy's good and tank. But overall, baseball has been Manfred's since he said piece of chunk of metal about the trophy. He's been on fire. Since he bungled the Astro situation, he's been doing great. This to me reeks of overconfidence where you're going, well, what could we do next? Right? Like robot umpires are kind of looming, but I think a lot of sports fans that have seen technology now really doesn't offer perfect resolutions to things.
Mhm.
And it often slows down games. And so if you're baseball and you just succeeded with speeding up, do you want to bring in umpires and more challenges and blah, blah, blah. So this one, it's like trying to make the starting pitcher a thing, trying to probably this would have a good effect, I think, on averages and home runs because you get to see like a pitcher more frequently. There's not as many bullpen days. But to me, it's just like this is an overreach. I don't want to have a hard rule where a starting pitcher has to be in there for 6 innings. I don't want to watch some guy have to all of a sudden fake an injury and fans have to wonder
Yeah.
whether he did that. I don't want. I don't like being at a baseball game when you're watching a starting pitcher labor and you know he just doesn't have it today, and then they feel forced or compelled to keep him in the ball game. Like I'm sure there would be some kind of like pitch out where they'd be like if he throws a certain amount of pitches because you can't force someone to throw 6 innings. He's like at 140 pitches. They're like, sorry, buddy, you got to stay. But either way, I just don't. This is like government intervention to me where I'm like, I don't need more of this. Like, you
Yeah.
just chill out, leave me alone, let me do my own thing. And I don't know. Have you like, dude, you do baseball podcasts. I'm running long here because you're just kind of, you threw this one at me, but have you ever once gone, they should have a rule where the pitcher has to go 6 innings? Like, has that ever been a conversation you've had?
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. And I think the biggest thing with this rule is that they made all these tweaks to try and increase offense and it's still down. So
Yeah.
I think that they're like, well, what do we do now?
Yeah.
Which is really funny
Make
to
the
me
ball
because,
bigger.
like, or back the mound up again. Like
I
there
don't know.
are options here, but it's interesting the route they're taking. I agree with you 100% that this is more of a heat check than anything. I can't see
Yeah.
them actually being serious about this for lots of reasons beyond just the obvious, right?
Yeah.
Like is MLBPA behind this? Like, do they want to see fewer pitchers getting
Yeah.
jobs? That's a tough one to buy into. I don't know, but I think heat check is a good place to put
Yeah.
that.
I just think when you're doing rule changes, it should be because it's pushed by fans. And yes, is offense down? Like, certainly. Are there solutions maybe that they should look into it? Yeah, but I also think that a lot of that when you talk to baseball players is not that they think it's a an issue with the actual game itself. It's the way that it's been taught. And that certain it's, the home run cut and the swing for the fences and don't hit for average, like, the
Cross your
drop
fingers and
off.
hope you get a big
Yeah,
contract before your arm
yeah.
blows up. Yeah.
Yeah, the drop off and 300 hitters, like, to me it's like there's better ways to be more creative with offense than forcing something where, like, I don't think the offense fans are looking for is the feeling of a pitcher doesn't have it and so you run up the score. Like, I watched a Mariners Red Sox game last week. It was Sunday Night Baseball, and I had it on TV, and it's like the Mariners crushed Boston, and they're doing the whole like we're leaving in the starting pitcher thing because we're just going to get innings now.
Yeah.
Who's like, yes, that's amazing offense, like that's what we came to see. It's like, no, you'd just rather see fewer, 3-1 through 5 and a couple more 4-6s. But yeah, I don't know. I appreciate good starting pitching. I appreciate good pitching. I appreciate good strategy. I think that the cool thing about baseball is that you get to play manager in a way that you don't get to with other coaching. Like, you sit with a friend and they're trying to, like, if you're watching UFC and you're like, you got to do the arm bar. It's shut up,
Yeah.
shut up. That's the stupidest thing that you've ever said. If you're watching the NFL and you're like, this is what they should be doing more of this, you're like, yeah, okay, kind of, but it's like sort of dumb. Baseball really is like, I'd
Yeah.
go to this reliever at this time, and it's like, yeah, you could sit in the dugout with John Schneider tomorrow. If you're a Jays fan, you watch the entire season, and like, you could do pretty good job of feeling like you belong there. And so trying to take some of that out of it, to me, ruins a touch of it. Do I think that all the innovations that the Rays made were fun? No, but I like the idea of teams trying to innovate over the league coming in and forcing a rule change, especially when it's one like, again, fans wanted shorter games. We were watching some of these playoff games and we were going, this is a nightmare. You got to stay up to watch the Dodgers until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah.
And I just can't do this. I want to see the sport. I think hockey kind of has a bit of a similar problem right now too, but that's more of a scheduling thing. But you needed to speed up the games. You couldn't have 4-hour regular season games. We were all turning into Mark Burley, where we just wanted to get in and get out and just be done with this. And they addressed it. And that was a necessary intervention. This is something that I've never heard a baseball fan say, we need less openers. It's like, yeah, I don't want to go to the ballpark when it is an opener as much as I do a starter, but I'd also rather, like, it's no different to me than an opener now in a crummy fifth starter that, no one's looking forward to see either.
Exactly. Okay. Let's get into some Blue Jays here,
Sure.
JD. The Jays obviously go to Anaheim. They sweep the LA Angels. Now, I'm
Right.
well aware they sit 9 games back of the wild card and logically 57 and 64, 7 games under 500. They're out of this thing. But I do think that it's important, especially for like a young team like they've become in the last few months, to have things to play for. Do you think hitting 500 is a good goal for this team to have? And what would you personally like to see out of this Blue Jays organization in the last 6 weeks of 2024?
To me, the record is inconsequential.
Irrelevant,
Entire,
eh?
yeah. If well, from a winning standpoint, yes. From a losing standpoint, I'd rather have more lottery balls than not.
Yes.
Always. I'm just I my first love in sports was the NBA, and so I'm probably more lottery ball conscious with other sports than the average viewer of baseball. Baseball is the least important to me when it comes to the draft. Like, yes, you can end up in years where there's a Paul Skeens, but yeah, I grew up on the West Coast. I'm very familiar with the Mariners. Like, I've seen a lot of Dustin Ackleys too, so being at the very
It's
top of the
all
draft,
development, right?
yeah,
Like,
a lot of it
yeah.
is, and I just think that yeah, I'd like to actually see the chart of the likelihood of superstar from pick 3 through 8, whatever the range you're going to be in. But I'm still a believer if you want to have more lottery balls than not, you'd still rather pick higher in the draft. But I've always been a little torn more so about the team chemistry vibes part of it is like these guys have had a pretty downtrodden season. You've seen the clips of Chris Bassett talk about heading into the trade deadline, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or a lot of these Blue Jays vets and, Bo Bichette before he got hurt and when he was around the media and just kind of like sulking all the time, dreaming about, going to San Francisco and how much of a bummer it's been not winning, not winning, not winning. To me, the value of this is reminding the guys of, oh, we're a little bit better. You got this version of Vladdy. Like,
Yeah.
the guy who's having Jonah Birnbaum posted today that as of right now it's 25 games versus what would be in the 60s I think for a second half, but as of right now, yeah, he's having a
Best
Barry
second
Bonds
half
esque
ever
ever.
right
Yeah,
now.
yeah. So it's like, and those are the markers that are important to me. Is like, can you continue to keep your confidence high rolling into next year? Can you feel like maybe you were starting to build something rather than dreading showing up at your workplace? Because if these guys are all having fun together, right? And they're winning some ball games together, and it's led by Vladimir Guerrero Jr., who continues to be this version of Vladimir Guerrero Jr. And you get, Bowden Francis pitching competently enough that you're like, oh, you know what? Maybe this guy is a fifth starter, or Yariel Rodriguez continues to look good, like Kevin Gossman rebounds. Then all of a sudden you can start like dreaming on being competitive again in 2025. And listen, I'm not trying to sell the fans on this because I think everybody is pretty much entrenched in their position of put up or shut up. Like I don't want to hear about this year was the year of positive regression, right? Like nobody wants to hear that shit anymore. Sorry, can you swear on this? I
Oh,
like
go right
yeah,
ahead.
nobody wants to hear positive regression ever again. Like you bring that shit and it's like, shut up. I don't want to hear it. Um, but if you're that team and you start looking around that locker room, you start winning, you start beating up on these bad teams, I think that almost lets you believe like, hey, we're not the LA Angels, right? Like there's a
Hmm.
lot of teams that get in the playoffs. Hey, we're not, even though they did just lose that series to the Oakland A's, but we're not the Oakland A's, we're not the dredges of the league. Like
Yeah.
if we all just play better, or some of those younger guys that are trying to dream on big league careers that are, and I mean this complimentary, like too dumb to know what you are yet, right? Like you're too
Yeah.
young. You're like, I'm confident I could be somebody, maybe you do hit on a Will Wagner. Maybe this version of Ernie Clement is kind of a something. Maybe Spencer Horwitz is, like a serviceable baseball player who can have a major league career. Maybe Dalton Varsho is more than just defense. Like he's hitting up the order right now, and he starts to build a little bit of confidence going, yeah, you know what? I can swat the odd bomb. And when I get on base, I'm a terror on the base pass. Maybe these guys start to believe in themselves. And when they finish the season, they feel like they did end on a high note, that it was disappointing. But heading into 2025, they as a collective have more confidence that they can win, that they don't feel as beaten down as they've looked throughout portions of the season. And like, I'm not with the team on a day to day basis, but I've asked a lot of people who are about it. And for the most part, the vibe has been pretty brutal. And if you pay attention to this team still, which you and I clearly do, I think it's hard to ignore that there's been a notable shift in just the dynamic of the group down the stretch here. And baseball, individual sport, whatever, math sport, blah 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 blah. I still believe there's a human element to it, and I think that what you're seeing right now has some impact on what their projection is going to be in the future.
So let's dream on 2025 then,
Yeah.
because the Jays will have Aroldis Martinez, Will
Mhm.
Wagner, Davis Schneider, Ernie Clement, Leo Jimenez, Spencer Horowitz, Joey Laperfino, Emmanuel, Jonathan Clase, Addison Barger. I mean, even Alan Rodin, you can throw into that mix of guys who are really vying for a spot on this team. You got to think two or three of those guys have to be moved in the offseason.
Correct.
Of the names that I just mentioned, who do you like? Who would you like to see be given some opportunity in 2025? And where do you feel that this team needs to upgrade to actually for fans to actually buy in to the lip service of this front office that 2025 we're going to compete?
So I am normally someone who says like I don't care about prospects, but in the way of I care about my organization's ability to restock the cupboards.
Mm-hmm.
Like I go, oh yeah, I don't care about prospects because you're supposed to be able to draft and develop the next crop of prospects. The only young guy that like really excites me right now is probably Savage. Like
Yeah.
just the pedigree and the promise, and there's like a couple of early Manoah parallels of just like dog competitor who is probably a little bit more ready, given that, he was a 4 year college starter.
And
And it's
still
kind
at
of
best,
on,
he's what do you think? Like
yeah,
a year or two away at least. At
right.
least.
That's what I mean. And I like what I've seen from the McAdoo kid.
Yep.
Just in terms of projecting the power and sort of looking at it and being like, the swing is pretty beautiful and he's progressed. I like the guys that are risers in systems.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't care where you were drafted or how you did, but it's like, were you a riser, right? It's like, um, I don't know if there's guys that are deeper. I'm not enough of a prospect junkie or like a tape junkie where I'm breaking these guys down enough and saying like, oh, I really feel this excitement about this player. I would say that there's like some stock down stuff where like I don't really believe Davis Schneider I think he's like an awesome guy. I don't
Mm-hmm.
know if he's a major league baseball player that is like a consequential one after having like real hope that he could actually be like maybe an impact guy.
Yeah.
The Loperfido holes in the swing is obviously a concern. Like there's a reason why we use strikeouts for projections. And you're kind of seeing that with Loperfido right now. I'm definitely excited to see what Jake Bloss can do. But again, I hope he enters next year in the minors. But yeah, like in terms of being like a massive prospect guy, to me, the benefit of really having it is you need to be able to supplement your roster with talent, especially when there's injuries. You need to have, the next waves of guys, which was their original thought, but also that when you are in a position, a competitive advantage where, you're looking to win, you got to use those prospects in trade. And at least now, what I like about the Jays is it seems like they have more names, even if they don't have a top 100 guy,
Mm-hmm.
which, was unfortunate for them and another hole for this front office. They seem to now have a lot more depth of prospects that they can piece together in other trades or lottery tickets where you're hopeful that one or two of these guys can stick at the major league level. In terms of what they need to add, everything. They clearly need another starting pitcher. Like that's beyond obvious. Shapiro again at that media conference talked about how, the bullpen was the big sore spot, but it was like at the time, the Jays were not in the top. I think they were 14th in Fangraph WAR for starting pitchers. Like they've lost their dominance in that area.
Yeah.
Gossman has looked better lately. I'm starting to believe maybe it was a health issue at the start of the year that lingered and that maybe we're seeing more of the same guy, but there's at least enough of indicators there with his age, Barrios' age, and Bassett's age that if you're going to roll all three in the next year, you're probably not going to get peak performances from all three, right? Like you've probably seen the best of those three guys. I like Yariel Rodriguez, but also, yeah, there's some signs to me of this is a guy that the league could figure out as a starting pitcher with more visibility. I don't want to see Bowden Francis start the season. I don't want to see Jake Bloss start the season. I think that the Jays need to go out and get another like good quality front end starter. They clearly need to revamp the entire bullpen. Like it's a disaster.
Yeah.
like, what do you count on there? You count on Chad Green and sort of Jordan Romano, but he was so hurt this year. It's relief pitching. You're kind of scared about it. You got to bulk that up entirely, build that out entirely. None of the guys
Yeah.
here right now, I'm like excited. Like, is there a guy that you want Ryan Burr in leverage next year? You
I
want to
mean,
believe in Eric Swanson bounce back? Like, all these guys can go.
and listen, the 2021 bullpen was
Yeah.
garbage as well.
Yeah.
And there was more hope in that pen, in my opinion, at the time than there is right now.
Agree.
And I'm well aware too, like bullpens are such a roll of the dice. If
Sure.
there is one area of need that you could, cross your fingers that just things come together, the bullpen is an area where that could be the case. But
Well, and they've done
yeah,
it before. They've grabbed pieces like Daniel Hudson, who we thought was
yeah.
like over in his career, and then he turned out to, still be a closer caliber player. Like, I think that, yes, they can do it, but also they've now had, even when Shapiro was like, oh, the bullpen was the Achilles heel, you think back to that 2021 season, that really did break them. And then this year, for it to be bad again, as much as we've complimented them for finding those pieces and getting those things done, like, can make the argument that 2021 was like, you blew that season because you couldn't put a bullpen together. And then this year, like, really did crumble and fall apart in terms of even dreaming on being competitive because the bullpen
Mhm.
got to such a sad state of affairs. So, yeah, they kind of got to prove it. Like, when we do the bullpen's a random thing because guys can drop off in any given year, but like, there's a difference to me with that and building the second worst bullpen in all of baseball this year, right? So, yeah,
100%.
so they got
100%.
to do that. And then, yeah, the bats, I think, like, the bullpen is the clearest need for an upgrade because it's like I said, it's only the Rockies have been worse this year, but the bat thing needs to get figured out here. Like, they got to get a meaningful bopper in this lineup. Like, no more. And like, I enjoyed the Justin Turner time, like, as a guy and as a player. I thought it was a fine signing. I had Brandon Belt on my podcast, and I really liked the guy, and I think his season was actually a little bit underrated from Blue Jays fan standpoint. But no more of guys like that. They got to go and get a guy like Teoscar Hernandez, who strikes fear in opponents, who smashes home runs, who can hit in the middle of the lineup and is like a credible middle of the lineup guy. No more like old veteran lottery ticket. Well, 2-3 years ago, he had an OPS plot. Like, none of that. If he stays healthy, if his old knee can, withstand
Yeah.
the impact of
Give
running to
me a
first
guy with
base.
a track record.
Correct. Correct. There's definitely an element of like Bichette needs to be healthy and better, or you trade him and you turn him into a consequential piece. This version of Vladdy really does instill a ton of confidence. George Springer's gone back in the tank and he's old, and I just don't have any faith that he's ever going to be like the guy that we saw for a month there, that little month uptick blip. They need another stud bat. Like, plain and simple, that's the most important thing from, I think, the psyche of the fan base team, but also like their ability to win, is that these guys completely bungled the idea, like, for defense, that you didn't need anybody who could hit. And it's like, no. They need a reliable on base plus slugging guy who, yeah, drives in runs.
So this is where I struggle with the idea that this team can be overly competitive in 2025. And honestly, JD, I hate rebuilding. The
He
idea of
does.
it makes me sick.
Yeah,
All right. So
disgusting.
I'm absolutely fine with this team trying to retool as they go. But like you said, they need a stud bat. And I don't mean like, like they need a stud bat. They need another member of this offensive core because this is not good enough. I really do think that they need a stud starting pitcher, like a guy who's like
Yep.
a number two again. And listen, Jose Barrios had a great outing last night, and he's had a bit of a weird season. And when I say weird, I mean, if you look at his numbers, they're fine, right?
He's been
3.9
bad since
ERA.
May.
Yeah, a 1.2 whip, 150 innings pitched. He's doing what we want, but I mean, if you start getting a little deeper and looking at the peripherals, I mean, like FIP, and I know a lot of people don't like that, but it's adjusted for defense and for the stadium. His FIP is over 5. So it does show he's been getting a little bit lucky. So I asked the fan base, right? I ask you, like, are you comfortable with Jose Barrios as that 2-3 in this starting rotation? I don't think I am. So you need a stud offensive player. You need a stud starting pitcher. You need at least one stud bullpen guy with a bunch of other options.
Mhm.
How much money are they going to spend? Right? Like, can you bolster that in free agency? Because free agency has kind of changed over the years. We've watched these teams find these young studs, develop them, and then sign them long term. It's becoming
Mhm.
harder and harder to have guys like Juan Soto be available at 26 years old. So
Mhm.
when you only have one guy like that every free agency, we had Shohei last year, looks like Soto again this year.
Mhm.
If you lose out on that guy, you're the 2024
Yeah.
Blue Jays.
So to me, this season for the Jays was a big reminder of, and you know, there's no salary cap in baseball, but there is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you know, every team has a budget, and the Blue Jays already spend a ton of money. Like every time I talk about this, I always seem like the biggest Rogers Sportsnet shill, but it's true. Like it's just an undeniable fact that if there's one thing about
It makes
Shapiro's
it
legacy,
worse.
yeah, I know, but that's what I'm saying is like if there's one thing about Shapiro's legacy that like you can say is undeniably good is that he's gotten Rogers to open up the pocketbooks in ways that they never have before. I think that 2015 and 2016 really did change ownership's outlook on like what this baseball team means to this country, what it can mean to this fan base. You know, dominating the summer from a live content standpoint, the events people love going to Blue Jays games. They've spent they spend a ton of money on this baseball team. I don't think it's going to go up by, a massive difference. They're not going to outspend the Dodgers and the Yankees. Like that's a world that, people can play in the fantasy playpen, like that's a thing, but it just it's not realistic. If they're here in payroll, they should absolutely be competitive. What this year was a reminder of is you can't just spend to win. And like the Yankees know this because the Yankees aren't racking them up. The Dodgers aren't racking them up. What do you need? You need to develop and hit on players that work underneath your top guys and supplement your talent. And they have missed cycle after cycle. Remember, I don't know if you're a football fan, but like, I'm reminded of the New England Patriots after the Tom Brady dynasty. It's like, what started to happen to the Patriots? They started missing on drafts. They didn't supplement any of the roster talent coming in. And so it was just the same guys. And all of a sudden the Patriots are falling apart because they don't have any talent. And that's been the thing with the Blue Jays is they didn't have any pitching coming up. They haven't had a first round pick that's had a plus WAR other than Manoa. And at this point, his career is like in complete limbo,
Huge question mark.
right?
Absolutely.
They have not found another diamond in the rough. They have not found another top 100 prospect. And yes, sure, injuries, whatever, but like that was always a thing with Ricky Tiedemann. Like injuries are a risk with every single professional athlete. So I don't really want to hear like that excuse, even though they've had some to their starting pitchers this year, like or their young guys this year. They need to do a better job of drafting and developing. And it's probably one of the most important pieces they need to figure out moving forward because they have the money. And could they spend it on better things? For sure. Have they made bad trades? Like, was the Teoscar Hernandez trade a disaster? Like, there's just no doubt about it. But they've made good trades too. Like,
Mm-hmm.
they traded for Robbie Ray. They gave up nothing for Robbie Ray, and they got a Cy Young winner. So, it depends where you are in the
Even the
cycle. When we're
Matt Chapman trade was a nice
Yeah, it
little
was
trade.
fine. It's a fine trade. Like, like they didn't give up anything that broke their backs. Um, they've given out some, I would say the George Springer contract doesn't look great now,
Mm-hmm.
and it's like all free agency deals. Like Hyunjin Ryu was amazing to start, then he was done. Like George Springer was amazing to start, and now he's slowing down. To me, it's just a huge draft and development issue. They've got to figure out how to supplement their roster with underlying talent, how to get better development, how to pick better players with higher upside, and how to get the most out of those guys. Because just if they don't do it, then the other things aren't going to matter. So yeah, there's all these holes that you mentioned, and I totally agree. They do need a front end starter. They need all those things that you mentioned. But what I think that they need most importantly in terms of the future is figuring out like how to actually get plus Major League Baseball players on this roster that they have control and they don't have to break the bank for that are, providing the majority of the talent.
And to do that,
Yeah.
if they are going to just roll back with this current front office and this current coaching staff,
Hard to believe
it's
that, yeah,
hard.
change
It's
is going to
hard
come.
to buy in that they can
Yeah.
figure it out,
Yeah,
right?
of course. What have you done to prove that you can do it? Who have you developed?
And you talk to the fan base. It's funny, like the amount of people who message us and are just like at their wits end, just
Yeah.
incredibly frustrated. And you just can tell, like I'm in the same boat, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just a diehard Jays fan. and I'm going to put myself through the emotional turmoil of this stupid season and
Mhm.
still try and buy into 2025 because
Yep.
I guess I just like having my hope squashed time and time again. So I guess,
Are
and
you not a
I mean,
little bit
only
more
time will,
optimistic? I know it's kind of dumb, this post All-Star stuff, but like the Vladdy thing is so incredible
it's
right now.
awesome.
Like I swear to God, I'm watching Vladdy and we've this is he's the one player when you talk about his body, people are automatically going to get defensive, but like he's so good right now that when I'm watching him trot around the bases after he's pimped another home run like he did last night, I'm like, did he get bigger? Like in a good way? Like is he growing? Like
Dude,
is he getting
yesterday after
taller?
that home run, my
Yeah.
first thought was a flash of David Ortiz. Like I
Yeah,
was
it's like
just big and confident and just
yeah,
like
he's just
slow
cruising around the
trot. Yeah.
bases and like, yeah, it just you can't fool him. He feels like I mentioned this on my show today that when guys get on base in front of him now, you used to think, oh man, don't hit into a double play. Now I'm just like, that guy's coming home.
Mm-hmm.
You're on base in front of like Dalton Varsho. Part of the putting Dalton Varsho thing in front of him is that I think that they're like, let's put a great base runner in here who can, capitalize on more bases, which is going to turn into more runs in front of Vladdy and boost his RBI numbers. Anyway, the way Vladdy's playing right now gets me back into like anything
Yeah.
is possible mode. And it's not like, again, the Blue Jays are not the Angels around Mike Trout where everything they touched went to shit. Like the Angels are the team that gave Anthony Rendon money, and he's like, I hate baseball. They're like, here's hundreds of millions of dollars. The Jays aren't that bad. So I just this version
It
of
does give
him,
hope. It
he
absolutely
does.
does
It's like
having Vladdy.
it's just impossible not to believe that they could compete next year when you see that when he's the best hitter in baseball. Like it's undeniable. It is. Like I'm more hopeful now than I was the entire time because he went from being like he's like a 8 something OPS player where I'm like, wait, no, is he back? Like, do they have a 9 something OPS guy now? Like, do they have another dude who's did he figure out the power? Like, because he was barreling baseballs last year and they weren't
Yeah.
going over the fence, and now they are. I'm like, wait, what is it? What is happening? Whatever this is, it's again the most consequential, awe-inspiring thing. And the crazy thing is like you and I are watching it because we're diehards and I work in media, but I think a lot of Jays fans are kind of like, yeah, season's over. Like Vladdy's getting like he's hot, whatever. Call me next year. And it's like, no, you should
You should
watch him do
tune
it.
in. Like that's the
Yeah.
thing, right? The it's garbage time
Yeah.
kind of narrative, and it drives me nuts because there is this narrative right now where this has all been happening post All-Star break. And don't get me wrong, he has been. We talked about it off the top. He's literally having the best second half of all time right now if he keeps this up, and that's not necessarily the case though. I mean, on June 19th, so he got hot early June when he started to find
Haircut.
his power. His OPS was 760. It's now 950. Like to raise
Yeah.
your OPS in 2 months, 200 is huge and shows you that he was
Unreal.
lacking power. But he was hitting before, like since
Mhm.
April 28th, he's been a batting average of 325. So it's like,
Mhm.
it's yes, you can give the narrative of too little, too late, but it's baseball 162. And if your superstar is going to give you 140 where he's a top 10 player in baseball, I mean, what more do you want from the guy?
Yeah. Well, there's one thing he needs to do, and that is he needs to be awesome when the chips are down.
Yes, that's true.
Because as of right now, it's like whatever. Again, baseball, mass sport, blah blah blah. Vladdy is clearly a guy who's impacted by confidence and the vibe.
Mhm.
And right now, if you think about his two best stretches that he's ever had in his career, the one in pandemic, where he's playing in, bandboxes where it doesn't feel like there's any pressure in front of fans
Yeah.
and he's cruising. That's awesome. And then it slowed down at the end of that year, but 2021 was his best year and it was a freak year. And now when there's never been pressure off this Blue Jays team like there has been under Vladdy, like what is that since the All-Star break, where the season was over, they knew they were going to be selling guys, and he gets to just go out there and have fun every single day. And like I don't think it's a stretch to say the next step for Vladdy is to enter next year when the team starts at 500 with everybody else and go out there and perform this way when there is the added pressure of we need this to win games, not just we need this to have fun. And so that is a piece to me. It just is. Like, I'm not doubting that this is the player Vladdy can be, but whether this is the player he is full time, that still remains to be seen. And that's kind of the only missing puzzle piece for Vladdy in the resume now.
It's such an intangible thing to talk
Yeah.
about, vibes. And I know you brought it
Yeah.
up a few times because Vladdy is, in my mind, the
Hmm.
ultimate vibes guy. He's
I agree.
just at his best when the vibes are good. And I know you look back on 2021 when he was on that hot streak and he had the barrio, right? And Teo and Lourdes were just like, he could lean on them, play the little brother side of things. And it's been really interesting to see since Leo Jimenez was called up and Stuart Barreau and some of these like
Mhm.
younger guys that are now looking up to Vladdy, like he's the mark, right? Where
Yeah.
he's the guy you can lean on and go to. And he seems to have really thrived in that position.
Yep.
So you look back though, can this front office learn from the past, right? And I again, I know nothing. I'm just guessing here. This is all stipulation,
That's
but
fine.
it feels like Vladdy does best when he's not the guy that needs to shoulder everything, right? So when there's a Marcus Simeon or a Teoscar Hernandez who maybe has a little bit more experience in the league, can handle and shoulder the pressures in big moments, and can the front office build around him again? Because he is 25. So I want to know, JD, do you think, and of course we're going to talk extension because this comes up at least once a year when it comes to Vladimir Guerrero Jr. With him only 1 year away now, do you think there's any way that an extension can get done? Or do you think we're kind of in that territory where it's Aaron Judge territory? And yes, he will sign with the Blue Jays, but we're going to need to wait till free agency and be the highest bidder?
I would just do it now. I
Yeah.
mean, I know you're
Just
paying him.
overpay, right? Just overpay and do it.
Well, the thing is that if you thought that the contract was impacted before, then like when he was having the down year last season, then you should have done it.
Yeah.
Like that we don't have a time machine. You can't go back and get it done then. And so all I would say to like a Jays fan that's like, you can't pay him now because he's at his peak value. It's like, yeah, except for if he does this for another year and
Yeah.
enters free agency and the Jays struggle and he looks at the landscape and says, wait, you know, the Yankees didn't retain Juan Soto and now they want to pay me. Like, no, I don't think you can risk losing Vladimir Guerrero Jr. I just don't. I don't think that there's an appetite from the fan base or from ownership to rebuild. I don't think that it's palatable to lose Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and then try to be, working off of that. It would be a massive step back. It would be a monumental failure. And so to me, it's like, I would say, yeah, the biggest priority of the offseason is going to be getting a deal done. And yeah, it's going to be a number that starts with a three. And there's going to be pundits that talk about how first baseman shouldn't get paid that much. And, they're probably going to end up being right because no one really lives up to free agent contracts, but he is 25. So
Mhm.
it's not the exact same, but either way, I think Vladdy has shown you enough. He's the face of your franchise. He helps sell tickets. Kids love him. Fans love him. He seems to care about this city. He's got the pedigree. He's got the respect around the league. He is a player that I think that if it, push comes to shove, another guy around the league has got equal money and he's thinking about Toronto, that Vladdy is a consideration for them. He's showing that ceiling that he can touch, which continues to entice everybody about him. So yeah, to me, it's time to give Vladimir Guerrero Jr. the money and stop dancing around it and just sit down and figure it out.
If you were a betting man, do you think this front office can get it done?
I don't know if it's like a matter of can they get it done. Like I think that yeah, there's probably a number that like Rogers clearly has a number that they're willing to pay him.
Mhm.
Like they'll probably meet something. Like I don't think money is going to be the issue here. I think it's the timing. I think it's what Vladimir Guerrero Jr. wants, and will they overpay for it, or will they want to see the stuff that I'm talking about, which is, hey, can you continue to replicate this throughout another year? Like, what is the price if Vladdy looks more like a 850 OPS first baseman next year versus what he's doing right now? Like, do they view it as like, hey, if we're gonna pay him anyways, will we just risk it and pay him at the end of it? Like I don't know that part of it. I would say that to me, it feels more likely than it has before. But it also again, like if they pay him before they pay Bo Bichette or trade Bo Bichette, like what domino does that create there for two guys that have been basically used to being, getting the same thing and being the two faces of the franchise? Like,
Mhm.
I just think it's a little too complicated to boil it down to like, can they get it done
Can
just
they?
because it.
Can't they?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't think that Vladdy's sitting there right now today. Like he has his contract in his hand and he's like, just sign it, please. It's like
Yeah.
there's layers to it. I think.
JD, really appreciate you taking the time to join us here, man. Big
Yeah,
fan,
dude,
and
it's fun.
I'm so happy that we got to talk some baseball with you.
Yeah,
Honestly, I
man,
could
me
talk
too.
baseball with you all day long. Before
Yeah,
I let you go, do you have one more minute here for?
yeah.
I want to know your opinion on this coaching staff, and if you think that there'll be any movement at all come the end of the season. If Ross Atkins stays on, can you see John Schneider staying on, or do you think someone's going to be sacrificed here?
No, I think listen, if you're running back Ross Atkins and you're running back Mark Shapiro, then you might as well run back John Schneider. Like there's no like if he's
I
already
actually
being
feel
paid.
the same way. I mean, I don't want that. I would rather
Yeah,
see a new voice at the top of
sure.
this, but
But what's the point? Like, it's just like it's like I said, it's not when you're the 29th bullpen in baseball. You had no offense all year. You had no starting pitching all year. I don't necessarily believe like John Schneider is an additive manager or that he's done like some spectacular job or justified keeping him. You know what justifies keeping John Schneider to me? The fact that ownership is already paying him money. And I don't want to pay two managers that are under the same regime and then have those two guys go. Like next year is to me an all in season for all involved. Shapiro's contract comes to an end. Atkins will obviously follow him out the door if he's gone. It's a cleaning of the house if they can't figure things out, and John Schneider goes with him. So to me, it's just like it would actually be kind of annoying to me if they fired John Schneider. I'd be like, okay, like so what? You're bringing in a different coach who's getting a contract that the next like it doesn't
yeah.
matter to me. It's a nothing.
And on that, we'll wrap things up.
Yeah.
Thanks again, my man. I really appreciate you joining us.
Thanks so much for doing it, man. Yeah, if your listeners like it, hopefully they'll go over and subscribe to my podcast, the JD Bunkis podcast, and then yeah, if you like the Leafs, I also do a show called Leafs Talk.
Check it out, folks.